This video was made possible by Cyberpower PC UK.
The fallen leaves tell a story. The great Elden Ring was shattered. Soon, Marika's offspring, demigods all, claimed the shards of the Elden Ring. The mad taint of their newfound strength triggered the Shattering.
The Shattering fractured the entire realm into a number of factions vying for power. Since it was the mad taint of their newfound strength that began the war, there was at least a short period after the Elden Ring was smashed before the fighting broke out. Indeed, not everyone turned to violence immediately. Miquella and Malenia returned to their Halig tree. Malenia remained absent during the Shattering until its infamous conclusion after marching to Caelid and confronting Radahn. However, much was yet to take place until that battle, and so the twins kept to themselves once again. Rykard retreated to the Volcano Manor, illustrated by how the forces of the capital later brought the fight to him. Ranni most likely stayed out of the war entirely, unless she worked with Miquella for a time. However, there is no evidence of how she spent these years, which aligns with her stalled fate. Even in the present, Ranni finds the doll's body surprisingly draining and must slumber periodically.
This doll's body is not without its hindrances.
She even mocks the other demigods for their fruitless violence.
What could the demigods ever hope to win by warring?
Godfrey remained locked up to the present day, and Mog remained beneath the capital, but for the first time began to stir, and soon escaped from his prison and ventured even deeper underground. Godrick remained at the capital, which he would later be hounded from alongside his army. Godwyn survived only as the Prince of Death, and Deathroot continued to spread through the land. Morgott served as the Omen King, or as he was publicly known, the Veiled Monarch, eternally loyal to the Erdtree. Briar Lucaria acted as they had previously with wars beyond their borders, and shut themselves away.
After they declared they wouldn't interfere with the Shattering, the Academy cast repelling seals on the east gate leading to the capital, and the south gate leading here.
However, not all remained in the Academy. There were the Heimer scholars, who refused to let war inhibit their pursuit for discovery. The Knights of the Cuckoo continued to roam and fight across Liurnia, and numerous marionettes remained where they were presumably already stationed. Additionally, the Academy lost control of a number of their puppet creations. The puppets. The puppets besiege us. Thus, the region, even to the present day, features civil conflict throughout, likely in part a remnant from the Academy rebellion against the Carians.
I'd just popped out, and now I'm uprooted from my place of learning.
Topes, a student who had been disrespectfully coined the Bluntstone, despite possessing skill of such import that it warranted a new conspectus, managed to get locked out from his home. This also helps to date Selen's expulsion from the Academy, though Selen may have been expelled much earlier, even perhaps during the Carians' reign. What is certain is that Topes was a fellow student at the same time.
Selen was well known, the most promising sorceress in the history of the Academy. I followed her at school, but Selen was expelled from the Academy, accused of unthinkable treatment of certain sorcerers under the name of the Graven Witch. I still don't believe the accusations. The illustrious Selen would never do such things.
The fact that Topes distrusts the information, however, may suggest that this all happened since Topes got locked out. Either way, Selen was kicked out of the Academy during the Shattering at the latest for the then banned practice of collecting sorcerers to fashion them into the Seeds of Stars. which, interestingly, suggests that before Selen's actions in the present day, she had only carried out such practices on other sorcerers, and not herself. Finally, there was Radahn. As previously established, it is unclear where his base of operations was during the Age of the Golden Order. However, it seems he was stationed outside the capital, since Radahn, the mightiest hero of the demigods, was in all likelihood responsible for the first outright warfare of the Shattering, the Second Defence of Leyndell. There is conflicting information regarding which faction attacked the capital. This scene in all likelihood depicts the siege in question, but while the soldiers marching forwards wear the colours of Redmane's soldiers, their armour's heraldry is of Godrick's army, and their helmets are the same as Godrick's soldiers, lacking the fanged visor of the Redmanes. Perhaps this suggests that Godrick and Radahn united forces for this attack. However, this seems unlikely for numerous reasons. Not only did Radahn later attack Godrick, but when Godrick fled the capital, he hid amongst the womenfolk. If Godrick was a leader besieging Leyndell, this would have been a pointless act, since he could have easily just retreated. Instead, the situation may highlight that this depiction of the battle is more artistic than factual. Thus, the Second Defence of Leyndell was in all likelihood a fight between Radahn's and the capital's forces, who were led by the veiled monarch, Morgott. There is no reference to Radahn's motivations during the Shattering, and in his current state, such knowledge is surely lost to time. But perhaps Radahn saw himself as the most worthy of rising to assume the throne of the capital. He was, after all, the most heroic and pure, epitomizing the best of both previous Elden Lords. This would explain how the conflict concluded before either side was completely defeated. Indeed, perhaps this is how Morgott seemed to come out on top when facing Radahn in combat, likely under the name Morgott. They were not fighting to the death. Radahn did not seek to destroy the capital or kill its armies, but sought to do what he thought was best for the faction. But Morgott knew better.
The Erdtree wards off all who deign approach. We are all forsaken. None may claim the title of Elden Lord.
In the chaos of the siege, Godrick succumbed to his fear that the city would be breached. The soldiers who served Godrick fled the royal capital of the Erdtree. Yet, even in this cowardice, Godrick did not flee with his soldiers, but hid amidst the civilian women. When Godrick was hounded from Leyndell, he took a multitude of treasures, including one known as Marika's Mischief. The word hounded suggests he was chased, which may imply that Radahn also broke off his siege at a similar time, or as a result of this act, and chased Godrick. Perhaps to claim his Great Rune, seeing as he was undeserving of its power. This chase went through Leonia, and likely culminated at Stormvale, where Godrick only survived by hiding from Radahn behind its impressive fortifications. Fortifications that had, over time, been gilded with a golden finish celebrating the golden lineage. Finally, after what seems to be a heavy assault on the castle, especially on the waterfront-facing side, Radahn retreated for a second time over to Caelid. During the Second Defence of Leyndell, Morgott reorganised the capital's forces for war. Armaments like the heavy crossbow and the brass shield became commonly used across the land. He employed Leyndell's perfumers, but not as healers. Indeed, their perfuming crafts could easily be used offensively, and the role of this sect transformed into an influential military one. The perfumers were drafted into service during the Shattering. The perfumers excelled in this new craft, and to this day there remains evidence of new recipes that were developed during this period, devised expressly for warfare. A record of crafting techniques left by a military perfumer contains martial techniques beyond the repertoire of an ordinary physician. This new aspect of their craft grew quickly, and the perfumers were so effective they soon became exceptional commanders. Perfumer censers were even weaponized as ballistics during the Second Defence of Leyndell. Interestingly, their greatest power in this role was not offensive. Instead, it was a potent morale-raising effect that makes those accustomed to it fearless in the face of death. In a way, it was still their healing that was at work, and with it they could strengthen a unit of troops under their command by many factors. These perfuming arts, though once jealously guarded in the capital, likely leaked, and they became widely practiced throughout the lands between after the perfumers were drafted into service during the Shattering. And as time went ever on, there were those who had fewer qualms about exploring the darker side of the craft. These heresy-inclined perfumers imbibed their own spices to alter body and mind. Their slow descent into self-destruction is what earned them their name. Soon, enemies of Leyndell employed these unscrupulous perfumers, who were called depraved. They donned an apron with embroidery of a curse upon the Erd Tree, a symbol perhaps of a candelabra, and interestingly featuring a spiral, symbolic of the spirals of life which the Golden Order halted. These depraved perfumers brought their own augmentations to the troops around them. Instead of a morale boost, they made their soldiers enter a state of fervour such that they could charge fearlessly into battle, reformed as berserkers. However, it was not just those that went against the Erd Tree who possessed flexible morals. The Shattering left no space for idealists, and some arts developed by capital perfumers serve well to illustrate the desperation felt by Leyndell in this period. Though fire was prohibited to those who served the Erd Tree, this rule was forgotten as the war drew ever on. Gargoyles who had lost their ability to move were taught these techniques as well, and served as sentinels throughout the city. These gargoyles, alongside the Second Defence of Leyndell, helped to date another important event, the sinking of Lower Leyndell. In the present day, there is a curious lake right behind the ramparts that would be easy to miss. Visitors are unable to enter through the main gates, and instead have to enter through a side passage to the north. This lake is enormous, and very jarring amidst the inside of the city. Furthermore, this scene clearly illustrates that Radahn sought to enter the capital through the main gates. Thus, the lake must not have been present at that time. Indeed, right below Lower Leyndell is the nameless Eternal City, where Godwyn's body lies. And, strangely, a number of the perfume-using gargoyles, perfumes that were not developed until the Shattering. As such, it seems the area behind the outer walls of Leyndell has sunk in the time since Radahn's siege. Gargoyles unable to retreat were drawn into the deep-root depths, as well as some mausoleum knights perhaps, who refused to leave their soulless demigods. The cause of the land's movement is unclear, but it surely isn't coincidence that Godwyn's body lies below, whose roots infest the ground throughout the lands between. Morgott's compromises didn't stop at fire, and he turned to the rejected offspring of Erd Tree society, the Omens. He used his own kind as brute force warriors, and sent them into battle to fight for the society that had imprisoned and rejected them since birth. Bespoke weapons were created and awarded to Omen as a tool of war, but this weapon, that even lacked the kindness of a handle, was cursed to break. Indeed, when bestowing a weapon, preparations must be made for taking it away. In this manner, Morgott ensured the Omen were less dangerous for times after the war, or if they managed to escape his control. Indeed, if they had not already come about before Morgott was allowed above ground, this likely marks the latest time the Omen Killers come about, a craft born from a perfumer named Rollo, the progenitor of the Omen Killers and a perfumer of antiquity. Once a famous perfumer, Rollo imbibed a physic to rid himself of emotion, thus enabling him to enact his nightmarish labour, hunting the Omen. And yet, the Omen Killers embraced their charge with surprising glee, as butchers of twisted conscience. The blade of this huge, loathsome cleaver comprises a row of amputated Omen horns, which cause blood loss, adding vibrant colours to the ongoing mayhem. And perhaps the most merciless technique was wearing the Omen Smirk mask. This visage is carved in the image of the evil spirits that haunt the Omen in their nightmares. After fighting off Radahn, Morgott heard news of the growing blasphemy in Mount Gelmir. News of such devastating import that Morgott risked the Erd Tree's safety and launched an offensive assault on Praetor Rykard, the soon-to-be Lord of Blasphemy. Rykard refused to fight for the pieces of the Old Order, and instead declared absolute war on the Erd Tree. He would not accept the role of Lord or even God within the plan of the Greater Will, and instead sought to completely overthrow it, a sentiment put well by Tanith.
Our Lord, indignant, has refused to scurry about, fighting over what miserly scraps they allow us. If the Erd Tree, and indeed the very gods, would debase us so, then we are willing to raise the banner of resistance, even if it means heresy.
This heresy of Rykard was to try to overthrow the entire system, inspired perhaps by the pagan beliefs of those he had been sent to quell around the volcano so many years ago, and of times before the Erd Tree. This, as well as some of his other plans, led Morgott to launch an assault on the volcano manor, and these plans to become one with the god-devouring snake were likely just plans at this time, yet to be realized. There is no evidence of snake men on the actual battlegrounds where the forces of the Erd Tree and of Gelmir met. Furthermore, in the present day, the Gelmir knight armor bears an emblem that none wear any longer, standing as it does for a lord that fell from loft ambition into gluttonous depravity. As their lord lost their dignity, so too did these knights lose their master. Though there was likely some overlap between the ongoing assault and Rykard feeding himself to the serpent, there must have been enough of a delay between the beginning of the assault and his descent into gluttonous depravity, such that the battle became a deadlock. Indeed, the battle was so evenly balanced, and the tactics so base, that it is called the most appalling battle in the entirety of the Shattering. Even an experimental firearm was considered, until it was discovered that no one knew how to use it. A war that dragged on, and in which both sides suffered appallingly. The assault on Volcano Manor, the squalid, the sick, the blasphemous. A wretched, unending war with no glory. Fighting continues in the present day, and the flame of frenzy has even burst forth in the eyes of some Leyndell soldiers who remain. Long before the assault on Volcano Manor, Rykard had met Tanith, a dancer in a foreign land, and soon he made her his consort. But this affection had not been mutual, until the day when Rykard finally fed himself to the blasphemous serpent. She was the only human to remain by his side when he became the Serpent of Blasphemy. In that moment, Tanith was truly charmed by him. She even refused his gift of the tonic of forgetfulness. "My lord, there could be no greater distress than to forget you." Conversely, no others stood by Rykard. "If this putrid field of death is what your blasphemy would bring, then I can no longer abide. No one can." Indeed, there are no Gelmir knights who remain in the present day. Rykard, however, understood the road of blasphemy is long and perilous. One cannot walk it unprepared to sin. Rykard's knights abandoned him, having lost their master, and some even searched for a weapon with which they might halt their lord. But though they did find one, they ultimately failed in their task. And yet, through it all, Rykard was not alone. He had Tanith, and the birth of the man-serpents followed. However, Morgott's army was spread too thin to take advantage of the disbanded Gelmir forces. Indeed, some under Morgott's command seem to have moved beyond his order. Omen killers, for example, began to hunt any of impure blood, and started killing Albinaurics as well. Perfumers lost their faith, and those who strayed found work elsewhere, such as at the nearby shaded castle, of which the Marai family served as both executioners and castellans. However, the sons of House Marai were all sickly born, and as such, either by now or soon after the Battle of Aeonia, Marley Marai was beguiled by the beautiful and fierce goddess who was born into rot, one who gave hope to their suffering. Malenia, and indeed Mikola, had been absent in the Shattering so far. It seems likely that this was when Miquella embedded himself within the Halig tree. If this was also when he taught Albinaurics the technique of metamorphosis, then it may also date the second generation of Albinaurics. For though these frog-like Albinaurics clearly wished to visit the Halig tree, shown by their numbers in the consecrated snowfield, and their use of Miquella's incantations, there are only the male, first-generation Albinaurics within the Halig tree. Thus, it is likely the second-generation Albinaurics, and perhaps even the female Albinaurics, arose after Miquella embedded himself in the Halig tree, cut off from the rest of the world and the roots of the Erd tree. However, Malenia did eventually move through the lands between. She led her Cleanrot army southwards, which may indicate she passed through the capital peacefully. She marched down through Liurnia and past Godrick, who, after throwing insults,
Lost to her in battle, only to lick her boots, rather than die like a man.
literally on his knees, begging for mercy, until finally, in Caelid,
The Conqueror of the Stars, General Radahn. And the blade of Miquella and Malenia the Seventh. These two were the mightiest to remain, and locked horns in combat.
But why? Why avoid the bloodshed for so long and then march southwards with such purpose? Why pass through Leyndell peacefully? Why leave the disrespectful Godrick alive, but risk everything to try and kill Radahn?
I am Malenia, Blade of Miquella.
As previously established, Malenia served only as an extension of Miquella's will. Thus, Miquella sent Malenia to kill Radahn specifically, perhaps so that the stars would be released to allow Godwyn to regain his soul, though there could be other reasons. In the present day, Miquella is found deep underground, coincidentally below where the Battle of Aeonia took place. However, how would Morg have taken Miquella before Malenia had left the Halig tree with her army? Surely none could have gotten close to Miquella while his twin sister was by his side. Furthermore, had Malenia been seeking her lost brother, she would not use the phrasing,
As I awaited his return.
She would be active in seeking him out, not passive in waiting. Instead, Miquella embedded himself in the Halig tree, sending Malenia to fight Radahn in the meantime, and it was Malenia's absence that left Miquella vulnerable. After retreating from his assault on Stormvale, Radahn had in fact undertaken a third siege. For though the castle in the present has been named Redmane, on close inspection it is clear that the island has in fact only recently been taken over by Radahn's forces. There is siege equipment outside, manned by Redmane soldiers, like those used against Leyndell. There are hangings of the soldiers, who bear armour of the styling seen in Limgrave. There are bonfires of the unarmed locals, and strung up throughout are weapons of exiled soldiers and banished knights. The Redmanes ruthlessly took control of the castle and slaughtered the inhabitants who likely had nowhere else to go. However, if they conquered the castle before fighting the Cleanrot army, Radahn chose not to fight there. Instead, he met Malenia in the centre of Caelid. Little is known about the fight itself, but both sides suffered heavy casualties, with only few survivors. Unlike Godfrey, Malenia did not seek to minimise the bloodshed, and sent her knights on Radahn first. Incredibly, Radahn ended up using this against his adversaries, and converted the spears with which he was stabbed into great arrows that he imbued with his gravitational power. Eventually, Malenia did fight Radahn herself, but they were locked in stalemate. Then, the Scarlet Rot bloomed. Malenia had but one task to fulfill, and she couldn't walk away with failure, so she sacrificed herself.
The pride she abandoned to meet Radahn's measure. The will that was once her own. The dignity. The sense of self that allowed her to resist the call of the Scarlet Rot
Malenia removed her unalloyed gold needle that was crafted to ward away the meddling of outer gods, and pushed to the very limit, the scarlet rot bloomed. An enormous flower that exploded and tainted the very land itself, the flora and fauna, the buildings, and soon the region. All of it was consumed with rot. Modern dragons were forced to flee and made nest of the plateau to Caeled's north. Thus it was named Dragonbarrow, and none dared to enter. Exikes, however, did not escape and became infested with the blight. The Redmanes either learnt quickly or already knew how to fight the rot, the application of fire in particular. Even today, the survivors of Radahn's battalion employ fire to stave off the scarlet rot, and as such, the Flamberge, beloved sword of Jeren, eventually became the symbol of the castle itself. But this was not enough for their leader.
Eaten from the inside by Malenia's scarlet rot, his wits are long gone.
Reduced to a beast who eats any he can find. Malenia herself entered a deep slumber. But then, Finlay, in an unimaginable act of heroism, carried the slumbering demigod all the way back to the Halig tree. She managed the feat alone, fending off all manner of foes along the way. In the present day, Millicent retreads this path, painting the story even more clearly.
Now I'm tracing the path Malenia took.
Thus, Finlay travelled north to the Altus Plateau via the ruin-strewn precipice, over to the windmill village of Dominula, through the capital and the Forbidden Lands, all the way to the Halig tree. Unsurprisingly, earning the status of legendary Ashen Remains. Who was truly the mightier demigod will never be known. The Redmanes were driven to defeat in the end, but Radahn was the last man standing, despite Malenia's bloom. Then again, Malenia in the present day has recovered, unlike Radahn, though that was only with the help of Finlay, and yet surely Radahn also had the help of his army even to the present day. One of the eternal mysteries of the lands between. As previously looked at, it is most likely during Malenia's expedition that Miquella was taken.
I heard speculation Miquella embedded himself in the Halig tree. But before he could finish, someone cut the tree open and absconded with his infant form.
And not just someone, but Miquella's omen half-brother, Mog. For multiple ages, Mog was locked beneath the capital. The cursed blood pot serves as a childhood memory and caused summoned spirits to assail him with a rabid fervour. But finally, Mog had had enough. Unlike Morgott, whose opinion aligned with the Erdtree, agreeing that the Omen Curse was a dangerous thing, Mog took pride in his form. He broke out of his prison and ventured deeper underground, where he found the formless mother. The Mother of Truth craves wounds. When Mog stood before her, deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire and besotted with the defilement he was born into. Finally, his curse, his suffering, had purpose, and blessed him with power. He used a sacred spear, both as a weapon and as an instrument of communion with an outer god, who bestows power upon accursed blood. Mog was directed to form a new dynasty, which he prepared for in the ancient ruins deep beneath Caelid. But Mog could not rise to full godhood, and instead looked to one he could serve as consort. And, eventually, Mog chose Miquella, his half-brother. Apparently, Mog managed to take Miquella from his Halig tree and return to his underground ruins without anyone realizing. For in the present day, none are even aware he is the Lord of Blood, and Malenia remains blissfully ignorant that she likely waits in vain for her twin. He even seems to have projected himself back into his prison, should anyone check up on him. Mog wished to become Miquella's consort, taking the role of monarch, but no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean. Miquella did grow substantially in this new cocoon, since he was much smaller when Mog captured him, but showed no response to Mog. However, though he appears unresponsive even in the present day, It seems Mikola himself may not be concerned with his corporeal body, and instead continues to seek answers elsewhere. The Battle of Aeonia marked the end of the Shattering, a conclusion born from destruction rather than order, where organised forces had been left in utter disarray, whether by casualties, losing their master, being spread too thin, or having to fight the accursed Scarlet Rot. The formal warfare devolved into a free-for-all, a situation that worked in the Lord of Blood's favour. Mog began to amass followers by abducting those who had a proclivity for bloodlust, such as war surgeons who were effectively mercy killers, or those who hail from the land of reeds, which has long been locked in a miserable civil war. Little wonder that the entire nation has succumbed to blood-soaked madness. However, none were able to tame the accursed blood. For now, at least. In Caelid, Malenia's very first flower spawned the swamp of Aeonia, and from this swamp, the pests emerged. Though men might recognise the keen intellect of the pests evidenced by this spear's uncanny design, it will never be understood by them. So clearly these pests are more advanced than they might seem. They are also present deep underground in the Grand Cloister, so it is likely that the swamp spawned new pests on the surface, but that this was not the beginning of their kind. They had simply suffered heavy losses since their god had been sealed away. O scarlet blossoms, flourish in distant lands, and return to us, the unwanted children.
Since Malenia fought Radahn, and the great scarlet flower blossomed in Aeonia, I have dedicated myself to her.
Gowry sought to realise the Order of Rot, primarily through a number of buds that had sprouted, the Four Sisters, and then even a fifth sometime later. Then there was Commander O'Neill. Even after his lord was fled, he continued to brandish this flag in the devastation of the rot-eaten field of battle, the sole veteran who remembers this battle with pride. Over at Redmane Castle, a new tradition was taking shape.
A war festival honoring the last battle and death of General Radahn.
Jaren served General Radahn as a guest commander, and they are said to have sworn an oath of honourable death to one another. Jaren must therefore have been serving Radahn before the Battle of Aeonia, and so has been bound to the fortress until he could deliver Radahn the honourable death he deserved. Across the lands, havoc reigned supreme. With no one to lead, bandits ran rampant in the wake of the Shattering. Fleur, the Bloodhound Knight, vowed that there was only one lord he would ever serve, a true king. And so, the rabid stray never found a master. The Academy never opened their gates again. Such was the havoc across the realm.
A war from which no lord arose. A war leading to abandonment by the greater will.
This was only the abandonment of the previous figureheads, of the demigods who had been entrusted with great runes and proved to be unworthy.
But the greater will has not abandoned the realm. So it is that the Tarnished are guided by grace, called to act.
Or perhaps Marika managed to do one final act before she was completely shut down. Whatever the case was, the legacy of Marika's unbeaten army, their ancestors, found themselves seeing grace, and were called to the lands between, the Tarnished. Overseen somewhat fittingly by the Two Fingers once again. The Two Fingers warned the Tarnished, follow the path that has been set for you, and you will make enemies of all others, the monks, the sorcerers, the ancient dragon knights, and the scions of gold. The Lands Between offers no welcome to the Tarnished. Indeed, the Tarnished would even find oppression from the Two Fingers themselves, whose servants served as the assassins of the Roundtable Hold. The assassins were charged with eliminating Tarnished who had strayed from guidance. Ironically, the assassins were themselves once Tarnished who had strayed from guidance, and they pursued their duty in the darkness that is without grace. These assassins were called confessors and wore black attire for blending in with the darkness. Even the churches outside the Lands Between, dedicated to the teachings of the Two Fingers, send confessors out to follow the guidance of grace. The Two Fingers even spent resources to try to eliminate the demigod Ranni.
The Two Fingers and I have been cursing each other ever since, and the baleful shadows are their assassins.
Assassins empowered by the Rune of Death. Importantly, though the shadows are naturally obedient, which causes Blythe difficulty in the present day, they are clearly not something under the control of the Two Fingers, despite what some characters believe. Relic of an assassin who assumed the guise of Ranni the Witch's loyal shadow. The likeness is striking. Why would the Two Fingers carry out such a complex and delicate plan of subterfuge if they could simply take full control over Blythe? Nonetheless, Ranni managed to evade the attempts on her life, and Iji, Blythe, and Seluvis continued to serve her in her dark path right to the present. However, it is likely Seluvis lacked loyalty even then, since he helped Sellen well before his actions in the present day.
She owes me for the help I gave her when she was expelled from the academy.
Importantly, the Tarnished were not all beckoned at once, and instead were continually graced over a long period of time up to the present. This is why some Tarnished are first arriving in the present, where others have been stationed in the Lands Between for some time. Indeed, just as more are continually brought in, so did those who showed little promise have their grace seemingly revoked.
The guidance of grace, I mean. I can't see it at all no more.
Gideon, for example, has remained at the Roundtable Hold for a substantial period. By the present, Gideon has had a long exchange with the Two Fingers, has adopted Nefeli as his daughter, loved and lost, making a rival of Seluvis, and is a self-proclaimed
true member of the Round Table,
seeing the newcomers as namby-pamby Tarnished. One of the first Tarnished to visit the Roundtable Hold was Vargrim the Raging Wolf. He earned his nickname from the white wolf pelt that adorns his helm. However, instead of Elden Lordship, Vargrim aspired to become a shadow of the Empyrean, which explains his armor's styling. And later, he managed to acquire the Godslayer Greatsword too. He was friends with one called Errant Sorcerer Wilhelm, who was also one of the first Tarnished to return. Wilhelm once belonged to the Hyridas Conspectus, and so was in all likelihood an outcast from the Academy. A silent seeker of sorcery who had gone so far as to make contact with the primeval current, explaining his expulsion. But Wilhelm was led by guidance into confrontation with his friend Vargrim, and it is said that he was then taken prisoner in Roundtable Hold. A very interesting story. It seems that the Two Fingers were not happy with Vargrim's choices, as might be expected, but Wilhelm refused to follow their orders to confront his friend, and thus he was punished too. And so the two remained allies, and continued to fight adversaries together to the present day. Little is known about Mad Tongue Alberic, but this heretical practitioner was an aloof yet disturbed sorcerer said to have been driven mad by jeering tongues during his service to the Roundtable Hold long ago. Though in the present day, the Roundtable Hold is a quiet, calm place, initially the Tarnished were rowdy and plentiful. Hugh likely served at the Roundtable Hold from before Marika shattered the Elden Ring. Likely cursed,
I know he was given this great entreaty to craft a weapon which could slay a god.
Hugh served only to craft such a weapon, right unto his dying days, even once his shackles were broken. But no Tarnished ever gave him that chance, none that he could call Lord, at least until the present. However, there were some Tarnished who showed promise over the years, who had the makings of Elden Lordship, and even managed to claim great runes, although these have been lost in the present day. And most promising of all was Vaik. No other Tarnished was closer to the throne of Elden Lord than Vaik. But without announcement, Vaik travelled far below the capital and was scorched by the flame of frenzy. Did he make his choice for his maiden, or did some other force lure him with suggestion?
Only once before have I seen two great runes together.
So Vaik managed to claim 2 great runes and gained access to Leyndell. If not already, Vaik joined the dragon cult and quickly rose in their ranks. In fact, of all the knights, Vaik the Dragon Spear was the one Lanciax loved the most. Then it seems that Shabriri's words managed to dissuade him from his quest, and he went beneath the capital to the 3 Fingers. Like Vaik himself, it has been tormented by the yellow flame of frenzy from within. Ah, Lord Vaik, it seems that you are no lord after all. So Vaik must have intended to inherit the flame, garnered frenzied followers, and then regretted his actions after inheriting the flame. Perhaps he even requested he be locked in an Everjail to limit the danger he posed. Curiously, he does not make use of frenzy within his Everjail. And also curious is that he was not required to remove his armor to be embraced by the 3 Fingers, which may suggest the Fingers' power was still strong at this time, compared to their withered state in the present day. There was House Hoslow, which has existed for generations. This work of art is handed down through the generations of the illustrious house.
The tale of House Hoslow is told in blood.
Dialos, the younger brother, was all talk and no trousers, and still remains in the Round Table in the present day. Meanwhile, the elder brother Juno inherited the Hoslow legacy without resistance. And though he would never consider himself a champion, this earned him an invitation to the Volcano Manor, which he discreetly refused, an act that was not received well. Indeed, the Volcano Manor had also begun to stir when the Tarnished had started returning. This furled finger is covered in snake scales, an heirloom of the Lord of the Volcano Manor, bequeathed to Tarnished who have become family. To grow in power, Rykard lured worthy champions with questionable morals to the Volcano Manor to aid in their dirty work.
Before you consider hunting any of your own kind, think on that.
And if they proved fit, they could
join myself and King as family.
On Rykard's sword are remains of the countless heroes he has devoured. Now they share the same blood, bound together as family. Rykard continued to grow at a rate faster than his snake body could manage, and his insides, full of these champions, burst from his skin in the present day. Snake people were actively created in repellent birthing rituals, which is how Raya was born. They apparently seem to be able to take the form of humans too. Then there were assassins known as the Formless Serpents, who specialized in deadly poison. Though it is unclear whether they had any true relation to the Volcano Manor, nor exactly when they arose, it is likely at least inspired by the recent snake revival. For news did spread across the lands between, whether good or bad. Troubadours sing tales of champions, both in the honourable service of the Erdtree and the one who spurns honour for blasphemy. Meanwhile, Godrick emerged in the wake of the Shattering and took control over Limgrave, acting as the Lord of Stormvale. A feeble man sought power through the grotesque act of grafting. One day we'll return together to our homes, bathed in rays of gold. This is the most likely time Godrick began grafting, since it is mentioned in tandem with being outcast from Leyndell. He sent out his soldiers, still loyal to him, to control the lands, and seek out Tarnished for his use.
That depraved lot are obsessed with sacrificing Tarnished like you for the sake of grafting.
And he recruited outcast soldiers, in addition to the Stormhawks, to man his castle.
This place is bristling with Tarnished hunters, you know.
Curiously, it seems Godrick managed to slightly normalize grafting, illustrated in the present day by Roderica.
Oh, you've come to be one with the spider? Well, that makes us two peas in a pod.
Roderica also illustrates that some arrived to the Lands Between without ever seeing Grace. Thus, this was also when grafted scions were born. After falling from grace, the dregs of the Golden Lineage sought power and purpose in the past. Some even went so far as to become royal revenants, whose grafting is so extreme in the present day that healing incantations make the various limbs tear the body apart, causing a ton of damage. Godrick even set up a chain of command at Castle Morn.
I'm Edgar, warden of this castle, as ordained by Lord Godrick himself.
Though this didn't last long. Morgott seems at the very least to prefer Godrick to the Tarnished and remotely defended Stormvale from intruders right to the present day. Interestingly, though they are all termed willful traitors, Morgott only seems to bear malice when referencing the Lord of Blasphemy.
Praetor Rykard.
Nonetheless, while Stormvale stood undefeated through these years, deep beneath the castle, a problem grew. It is unclear why this location is so important. Perhaps it relates to the boat's funerary rites here, perhaps the relation of the castle to the Golden Lineage, but a second manifestation of Godwyn's soulless body began to form in the castle's depths, and through this, mottling and thorns spread throughout the castle, a mystery even to the inhabitants. Some say it is the curse of grafting which causes such affliction, while others talk of its root being something altogether more sinister, hidden deep within the castle. Morg continued to recruit for his dynasty, and the Tarnished proved the first to be worthy. None were able to tame the accursed blood. None but Vare, that is, though he was an exception. Then there were those who hailed from the blood-soaked land of reeds. There was Eleonora, whose legacy is stained by accursed blood. And then there was Okina, one who rose above the absurdities of the world. There was only himself, his katana, and its mastery. Before long, Okina became a demon of a swordsman, and then he met Morg in battle. When Morg first felt Okina's sword and madness upon his flesh, he had a proposal to offer Okina the life of a demon whose thirst would never go unsated, a demon who would continue to haunt the Tarnished right up to the present day. And though Morg's dynasty is yet to be realized, he did establish a hierarchy using a medal, proof that one is a glorious knight of the new dynasty of Morgwyn. Over in the north, the Guardians of the Flame of Ruin continued to falter. Some monks had already abandoned their post in favour of the Black Flame, but now they even had a legendary hidden incantation taken. Arganthy, the chief guardian of the Flame, had kept this incantation a well-kept secret until it was stolen by Adarn. Firemonks and Thorn sorcerers were sent in pursuit, finally capturing this thief in Aeonia, where they locked him in an Everjail as punishment. This must have been a recent development, considering the monks still remain in Aeonia in the present day. And so, even the prelates, the commanders of the fire monks, began to break ranks. The fire of this cauldron has since died out, however. Indeed, one who abandoned their post discarded their red garb, on which was marked the onus of their grave vows as guardians. They seem to have aligned with the blasphemous and joined the ongoing battle against the capital's forces by attacking Fort Lythe. Some Tarnished were recruited to help the numbers at the Guardian's garrison, perhaps because the monks, sorcerers, and even prelates could no longer be trusted. There was Devin and Darian, who were of 2 bodies and 2 minds, but 1 single soul. Curiously, a theme that resonates with that of Marika and Radagon. And the Golden Order was the only institution not to revile them as accursed beings. As such, they became fundamentalists and sought to reinstate the Golden Order. They had been friends with Roger.
We found ourselves journeying together for a time, bound by our exploration of death, but our paths have since diverged.
Dee saw the disgrace of those who live in death.
When grace is sullied, it rots people from the inside, breaks them.
Where Roger saw that these beings had done nothing wrong and felt sympathy for them, eventually forming ties with another Tarnished. Fia, one who was a deathbed companion even before seeing grace, and who soon bed with none other than Godwyn himself. Goldmask, a widely respected fundamentalist, looked beyond those who live in death in pursuit of true answers. During this time, he was seen as a lord and had disciples who followed him, though in the present day, only one remains for the time being. Then, infamously, there was the Dung Eater, a Tarnished with the heart of an omen without the body to match. A man of extreme beliefs. The heavy, sun-shaped medallion represents both the guidance he once saw and the ring to which it will one day lead. To this end, the man murdered thousands and defiled their corpses with the seedbed curse. By doing so, he prevented dead souls returning to the Erd Tree, leaving them forever cursed, one of the most loathsome things found in the lands between. A man who was worth the resources of locking up beneath the capital, though how that compared to Boggart is unclear. However, even this did not work, and the Dung Eater continued to curse others even as far as the Halig Tree, right up to the present day. Geraint continued to try and make up for his mistake on the Night of Black Knives, and worked with what remained of the Golden Order to seek out Deathroot to reunite with the Rune of Death inside him. He may have even removed his own eye to aid others in this task. A fruitless quest, all the while fighting against the fading intelligence that was gifted upon their kind, and confused at his master's actions.
Marika, why wouldst thou gull me? Why shatter?
One who hailed from Aeoke, a land of proudly solitary ascetics, at some point managed to at least partly overthrow the Morai rulers at the Shaded Castle. He somehow managed to snatch the family's storied sword from the site of his looming execution and furnished it with battle skills from his home. And with this, he continued to wreak the havoc he had likely been previously charged with. Elima murdered numerous instructors and merchants, and was known as the Bell-Bearing Hunter. There were also the noble living Jars. It is difficult to date these beings. They could even have ancient origins, given how Jars featured in beast culture. Though the Jars are brought to life by human flesh and blood, they are all rather kindly folk. Perhaps they were made to be better than their innards. These Jars seem to serve as an alternative method to bring the bodies of champions for the minor Erd trees that were growing across the land. There, the avatars would break them, who had emerged in the wake of the Shattering. However, the living jars were fully sentient, and grew a culture of their own, settling in the east of Leyndell. Once there was even a nameless man who sought to be worthy to join the warriors inside, which may suggest society saw this as an honor, just like Erdtree burial. Unfortunately, new perfuming arts were developed that required fragments of hunted noble jars. Depraved perfumers are plainly in league with jar poachers, and so the jars lived in fear, seeking one who could protect them. The Erdtree Guardians spread out across the lands and protected the new minor Erdtree offspring, though not all of these have survived to the present day. Some Tarnished made friends with the Ancestrals, who had rejected the artificial cycles of the Erdtree in favour of returning to nature and life from death. The Spiral Horn Shield was once given to a Tarnished warrior who cultivated close ties to the ancestral followers. By this time at the latest, there arose people who collected the power of meteorites. The desperate ones which scavenged for these shards dubbed themselves Star Callers, and as such, they paid homage to those beings that rose from meteorites, the falling star beasts or malformed stars. And finally, the first ever Tarnished was also called back to the lands between. Godfrey. He had done as Marika originally instructed. He had led the Long March and waged war. During this time, his weapon had been broken in a battle fought as leader of the Tarnished. Finally, he had died, strung up alongside his beast regent Sarosh. But he too was graced once more, and with this new life, he returned to the lands between. After the long march of the Tarnished came to an end, Godfrey divested himself of kingship, becoming a simple warrior once more. This is somewhat unclear. Does it mean he became a simple warrior over in the foreign lands? After all, he is called Hoaraloo when he is gifted grace. Or does this include his return to the lands between? He does act as Godfrey rather than Hoaraloo, right up until his last moments fighting at the foot of the Erdtree, and the transition to become a simple warrior once more doesn't seem reversible, which it would need to be if he had done this in a faraway land previously. Miriel, infinitely wise, whose life has spanned many ages, remains to the present day at the Church of Vows, offering guidance and aid to any that may need it.
All things can be conjoined.
And there were others who sought to do good within the realm. There was a traveller, an associate of a healer, who is said to be in search of new aromatics and flower gardens, in hopes of treating misbegotten, omen, and all those seen as impure. This healer was most likely Tricia, who dedicated her efforts to treating these impure beings. When her efforts failed, she was their companion as they died, watching over them to ensure that they could pass peacefully, free of pain, a tale akin to the origins of the deathbed companions. The years went on, and more Tarnished were beckoned with grace, all to no avail. The two fingers grew tired, aged, and trembling. They could no longer speak with ease, and only greeted new Roundtable members once they had at least claimed their first Great Rune. They lost many of their servants, as suggested by the phrasing that they once served. The lands between, at every level, was broken. Just like the simple weathered straight sword, though the Erdtree styling is still visible, time has not been kind to this sword, now merely a shadow of its former self. Gravekeepers were insect-ridden. There was no longer any societal hierarchy beyond the small factions that fought on, and aristocrats or nobles became wanderers, abandoning their birthplace after the Shattering. These undead wanderers are the pitiful product of unending life. This even included the aged, which serve as an apt comparison to the stability of the previous era. In the capital, there arose Oracle envoys. It is said that when Oracle envoys appear playing their pipes, they do so to herald the arrival of a new god, or age. Soon, one capable of changing the age itself would arrive. Unless, perhaps it is too early to sound the call. These oracles also appeared at the Halig tree, which suggests that despite everything that went awry, Miquella had created something which could bring forth a new age. Could this be what Gideon implies when he says,
Perhaps the Queen's sorrow was justified.
That Miquella was the best chance of the demigods, and when he learns of Mog's actions, he understands the truly hopeless situation that Marika must also have realized. Until, finally, there was one other.
Whom grace would again bless.
Who may just be worthy of becoming a lord. Tarnished, O Tarnished, seek the Erd Tree and stand before Marika, its queen. Become the Elden Lord. And so, just as Marika's reign was built, so would it fall. Despite everything she did to avoid fate, the cycles of nature are inevitable. And the rest is history. Thank you for joining for this episode on the timeline of Elden Ring. For more, consider supporting the channel and get early access to upcoming releases. You can also have your own theories featured in video format on the channel, or even get access to new Lore Before Bed videos ad-free for less than $1. Your support makes content like this possible, so thank you.